All right, my friend Steve Stewart, podcast editor, co-founder of the Podcast Editor Academy, and founder of the world's largest podcast editor and most diverse podcast editing community in the world. How'd it do?
You remembered all that. That's great. That's a lot.
Podcast editor extraordinaire.
It's my favorite thing in the world.
Yeah.
Didn't know this. Didn't know I was going to love it until I started doing it.
Well,
crazy.
For the listener and for the viewer, it's obvious. Thank you for the gracing my wall back there first.
Oh,
yeah,
yes.
The wall, the podcast junkies. Look at that, the T-shirt. What do you call that? Your T-shirt Hall of Fame?
It's the T-shirt wall. My wife was trying to find a great Christmas gift for me. She couldn't figure out what I wanted.
Yeah.
And she's like, well, you know that wall that you got behind your live streams is kind of boring. And it really was.
Yeah.
She came up with the idea. She did all the work. And now I've got a wall of classic tees up there. So, yeah, lots of great stuff.
If there was an incentive for the listener to watch on YouTube, which will make it on there, I've been doing a better job of getting this content on there and taking advantage of this great video that we're shooting nowadays, courtesy of Squadcast. So
yes,
you can see that wall. Do T-shirts get swapped in and out?
No, actually, I'm supposed to extend it over here.
Okay.
And I'm sure we'll talk about why you can see this area now later in the interview.
Okay.
But we are planning on moving next year, so I'm not going to do anything else right now.
Yes.
See what we can do on the next place.
So I probably should have had your episode. Do you remember your episode number, your first appearance on Podcast Junkies?
21.
21. Yikes.
Or 22. I'm going to find 22 because it's still up on my Overcast app. And you did chapters,
Yes.
which is not something you did back then. That's very good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And so thanks for coming back on. And thanks for being an early supporter of the show. I mean, that was probably 2014-ish or maybe 15. But yeah, I was just getting started. And I think we connected at some podcast conference or I saw you and I was like, this guy looks like he knows what he's talking about.
I was talking to Elsie Escobar when we met because you were talking to her.
Oh, yeah.
And then we just started talking.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Yeah.
Yep. But I did all that just to get on your show for the T-shirt.
That's a pretty... So 10 years is 2024. Wild for me to think about. And so I really have to plan it. I've put the bug in Jared's ear that I want to speak and I want to tell my 10-year story. So he said he might give me a shot on stage to do that. So that would be fun. So
title the session, The Top 5 Lessons I Learned.
Okay.
Or the top 10 if it's 10 years.
Yes, that would be great.
Got to key it in that way. That'll work.
Okay. I'm going to have to credit you for... Get Steve Stewart to prep you for your talk. That's one of the tips.
Fantastic. That'd be great.
And I think I'll have to bring the T-shirts back. For either... This is something I'm talking about, so I'm live brainstorming this with you. But one of the thoughts is to buy enough and then check to see who's going to actually be there from past guests. Get them all new T-shirts and then have them sit as close to the front row as possible. And then
and get a nice picture while you're on stage. Yes.
Or get them to stand up or something like that. So, I mean, I'm at 300 plus interviews, so there's a good...
Well, you don't need to do it that complicated. Just get all the shirts, put them in the front row. People who get there, just tell them you got to put it on for a selfie, and they'll do it.
Yes.
You don't have to qualify them as being former guests.
That's
I mean,
true.
I'd wear this shirt, except I couldn't fit into it anymore. That's why it's on the wall.
So talk a little bit about your podcasting journey, because obviously it's been a long time, and there's folks that are going to be finding you for the first time with this episode. So to the extent you want to cover or what you want to cover, talk a little about that.
Yeah, last time we talked, I was on episode 162 of the Money Plan SOS podcast. Been doing it since November 2010, but I retired it in October of 2015 at episode 200. And if they go back and listen to episode 22 of the Podcast Junkies, they'll hear there was times when I was questioning why I was doing this. And I didn't want to quit and didn't want to give up. And should I rebrand? Well, guess what? I almost rebranded. I was retiring the show. I thought 200 would be perfect. In fact, one of the big things in my life was attending the FinCon Expo, which started out as the Financial Blogger Conference in 2011. I didn't make it to the first one. I made it to the second one, fell in love with the community. And I was known as, well, there were very few podcasters at this so-called blogger conference. And I was always encouraging people to start a podcast. And so I became known as one of the few bloggers with a podcast. They eventually let me speak and stuff, but I was always encouraging people to start. And that turned into a career.
Yeah.
But going to why was it going to this story here?
Just to start, I mean, just how we started and just your podcast roots.
Right. So I recorded my 200th episode at FinCon 2015, a year after you and I had the first conversation, and was going to launch a new show. In the meantime, there were two very famous bloggers from that community who were talking. They've been talking all year about starting a podcast. And they were talking, and they were talking, and they never pulled the trigger. And they finally said, we just need some help. So they contacted me. We had a conversation in December of 2015 and said, Steve, we just want to hit record. Will you do the rest? I'm like, sure. Yeah. It's going to be a new side hustle because I can't just do it for free. And they're like, absolutely, Steve, we'll pay you. I was making less than minimum wage doing this thing. But it was fun. Yeah. It was something that I already knew all the skills. I wasn't great at it, but I knew what to do, and I could help them out, get launched, and edit their show. Well, there were two big name bloggers, and of course, with two big name bloggers in a space, other people in that space hear about it. By then, about a month later when we launched the show, this is crazy, Harry. So the show launched, and it hit number 5 in the business category of iTunes. Back then, it was still iTunes. Yeah. Even though their category is business investing, it hit number 5 in the business section. So, and that was in 24 hours.
Wow.
Crazy.
Wow.
So a lot of people heard about it. And so people who I knew from FinCon were then, the next couple of months, were like, oh, we know Steve. We like Steve. We trust Steve. We don't want to edit. Maybe Steve will edit. So it just became a career by about 6 months later.
Okay.
Middle of 2016, it was all I could do. So I had to give up everything. I've been working on building a financial coaching business for about 8 years. I already said that I retired the podcast, was going to start a new one. Yeah. That didn't happen. I had previously quit the day job to focus completely on the financial coaching business, which just did this. And if people aren't watching, it's just a steady line. Yeah. Just a steady line. It didn't really grow, even though I put more effort into it. So I thought, okay, good. I'll give it a shot. I'll go full time 6 months after I started doing it as a part-time thing. And that's my career now. And I love it. I love it, love it, love it, love it, love it.
When you think about the jobs you've had, your career, because I don't even remember how deep we got into the stuff that you do pre-podcast. What is that? That would be BC before, or BP before podcasting.
BPJ.
Yeah.
Before Podcast Junkies.
Yeah. What the 30-second recap of like the life you were living back then?
Okay, well, we'll start with just the year 2000. I took a job with a company where I was auditing their units and franchise owners.
Okay.
So there's a lot of travel involved, and that's how I started to hear about podcasts. At first it was radio, but then I started hearing some radio shows talking about podcasts, and that's how I started hearing about what a podcast was in 2000. I think I discovered it in 2005, so I wasn't one of the early adapters. Yeah. Early compared to a lot. But it was, it was as an internal auditor for a company, and then the side hustle at the time was financial coaching, because that was really something I got into and really loved. So I kept doing that until March of 2015. So again, probably about 6 to 8 months before I started talking to other people about editing for them.
I noticed a trend or a through line of finance. You mentioned auditing as well. Is that something you studied or just something you had a passion for early on?
Okay, we got to go back further into time here, Harry. Let's go back. And we talked about this in the first episode, or episode 22 of Podcast Junkies. Go back and listen, everybody. Yeah. DJ.
Yeah.
From high school, was in a breakdancing group. Everybody can see my Run DMC sweatshirt that I wore for you. So I was big into vinyls, DJing, and I was in Chicago, so I was into Chicago House when it really started. And so the music, all that stuff. And then I started working at record stores and kind of moved up the ranks, started working as assistant manager, and then actually got to run a couple of flagship stores when Blockbuster got into the music scene and they opened Blockbuster music stores. Yeah. So I was involved there for many years, and then what was the reason why? Oh, just an opportunity came up for an internal auditor position with Blockbuster Music. Okay. I thought, well, this is perfect. I already know all the ins and outs. I already know everything that everybody tries to do to steal because they tried it with me. So I'd be a great auditor, and got the job. Yeah. And I did that for probably about 2 years. And then, boy, we're going to go into some deep stories here. Yeah. Then in the year 1997, December of 97, I met the woman who is now my wife. So I'm living in Chicago, internal auditor for Blockbuster. Meet her. She lives in Dallas. Long distance relationship. We actually made it work. Yeah. She decided to move to St. Louis. I decided to chase her, but I had to give up the job. I thought, okay, well, I'll go back to like an assistant manager at a Blockbuster music store. So I did that, and that was for maybe another year or two. And then I saw the writing on the wall, because this is now about the year 1999, 2000. We're talking Best Buy, Circuit City, Target were selling CDs really cheap. I saw the writing on the wall. And then we had Napster. Yep. and LimeWire, and there's another one there. So people are just downloading music. So I got out of that scene when I found an auditor position with CKE, the company that I then worked with in 2000. So it was kind of I went up in the music chain, and then I couldn't go any further, and moved over to a different company to do the auditing. Wow, you need to edit all that out. That was boring.
No, not at all. I think what's interesting is that people take for granted just crazy paths we take to end up where we are right now. Because if I told my story, I've got employment going as far back as working for like a spy store, being a waiter, just working in I worked in construction. I was in hard hats and climbing scaffolds, worked at a bank. I was a teller, and so I've done a lot of wild and interesting jobs, just that leaned into my skill set. And I think most people think that a lot of people will have this one career trajectory, just like go to college, study the finance, get a job in finance, get promoted in finance, become a boss in finance. And I think it's so interesting because you're following your passion. In this case, you're following your love as well. And sometimes, look at me, I'm in Minneapolis. I'm in Minnesota, the farthest thing from the both coasts, because I've lived in New York and LA, and it's because of love. And, obviously you've met Natalie, and I'm grateful to be here. And it's a completely fish out of the water experience for me. So much so that I'm asking my partner, Natalie's father, to maybe you want to teach me how to shoot a gun. And so,
oh, wow.
So just kind of like, interesting, because you have an interesting relationship here, especially a big hunting community, and you have respect for what they do. And, we eat stuff that he's hunted, and it's so interesting. I think there's something to be said for continuously being put out of our comfort zone into different environments, different experiences, because it sort of all makes us what we are today.
Well, you certainly had a lot more jobs. I mean, you and I come from the time when you didn't change jobs that often.
Yeah.
These days, it's pretty much expected for one reason or another. But, I mean, a lot of people come out with that idea of that corporate ladder.
Yes.
Getting out of college, one career path, that doesn't exist anymore.
No.
It's for some. But then I think they're looking at, like, the career ladder of a startup, which didn't exist back then. It's very interesting and totally different. But now you can jump jobs, and there's so many new jobs that didn't exist 5-10 years ago. Almost 10 years ago, we had this conversation. I had no idea I was going to be a podcast editor as a career. Who does that? So now it can be a full-time job. Yeah, believe it or not.
And I did shed a tear, and we talked about this at the conference when we connected. You had to part ways with your collection.
The big bare spot on the wall. Used to be a wall of records. Yeah, I gave it up. I sold them to a guy that it was totally fitting for him, so it was a great option. I didn't want to have to move all these.
Talk a little bit about that process, because I'm sure that's not a decision you make overnight, especially. I mean, I'm thinking myself, I've carried my vinyl collection has been with me from New York to Atlanta, back to New York, and then over to California, and then pulled out of storage. Wow. And so whatever's left and can fit in those IKEA bookcases that you do sideways, 8 panels. That's about what I got left.
Right. Yeah, I've got these metal racks over here that held thousands, and most of them were 12-inch vinyl remixes or dance records. Yeah. So it was a very unique collection because, again, grew up in Chicago, was DJing, so I bought not LPs, but 12-inch vinyl. We're going to bring people down here with the story.
Not
if you
at
want
all.
to hear it, but
we're going to bring them up.
So we've already talked. Yeah, I already talked about how I was a DJ in high school. I was in a breakdancing group in high school, and my best friend was the leader of the crew. Yeah. And obviously, the whole crew was full of friends now.
What's the name of the crew?
It was the Crew Masters.
Crew Masters, okay.
Yeah. We're one of the only breakdancing groups in the Chicago suburbs. There were some in Chicago proper, but still it was kind of like an outlier thing. But anyway, so my best friend, he passed away in September 2021.
Okay.
Not for the things that we thought would happen. My best friend had testicular cancer at age 16.
Wow.
And went through chemo. And if you know anything about biology, or you can just imagine the fact that if you go through chemo at 16, your body doesn't necessarily develop on the regular trajectory that everybody else does.
Yeah.
So he was constantly having weird things happen throughout his life. You'd never know it if you saw him. And he was the nicest guy, and he would remember your name like that. And you wouldn't forget Tim. Mm-hmm. Tim with 2 M's, nicest guy in the world. You wouldn't forget him. And so he survived that. He was thriving and stuff, but he always had these weird medical problems. And then in 2019, he calls me up. He's like, guess what? I've got cancer again.
Oh, man.
After 35 years.
Oh, man.
I'm like, oh, you got to be kidding me. So he was being treated for that. And here's my best friend suffering again through cancer again and beating it again. Amazing. Amazing. September of 2021, we lost him to COVID. Yeah, we lost him to COVID because, I mean, when you're going through chemo and you're dealing with cancer and all the medications, and here's this new drug that he can't take because nobody knows exactly what it's going to do to him.
Yeah.
He eventually gets COVID and they just, yeah. So because we lost him and because I was no longer DJing, I didn't really feel the need to keep the vinyl around.
Yeah.
If I've got digital versions of all this stuff, I can play them and it's probably easier. I'm not going to turn turntables on. I'm going to open up my music app and play them from there. Yeah. I'm always going to have it on my phone with me or whatever. Yeah. So I can remember Tim anywhere I go with my phone. Why keep a ton worth of vinyl around?
Yeah.
So I came to that conclusion that, you know what, it's okay for me to sell the vinyl. I actually sold my CDs as well.
Okay.
All but maybe 100 to 150 CDs. Big collection.
Yeah.
And what am I going to use them for?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I just found some people who could use them, and I was okay with letting it go.
Yeah. Where did they come from? They weren't in town, right? They're from out of town, the folks who bought it.
Right. So I moved to St. Louis in the year 98, but most of the records would really, most of them would be for someone who lived in Chicago.
Okay. Who would know the music.
Chicago. Yeah, so the guy came down with a big U-Haul. We loaded it up, and he hauled it back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Got to say goodbye to them. So interesting to have that connection to something that was a big part of your life. I'm curious, did you have a specific move in the breakdancing crew?
Yeah, there's a lot of people reference it to like the Russian dance where you're, how do you describe it on audio? So you've got your hands on the floor and your feet on the floor, but you're kind of looking at the ceiling.
Oh, okay.
And you kick one leg up.
Yeah. Okay.
And you're standing on the other, and then you switch midair.
I got it, yeah.
So that was kind of my thing. But I was the DJ, so I didn't have to dance that much.
And I think the moment that I saw Beat Street is probably the first time that I don't know if there's something that I saw on camera in terms of breakdancing. And I just remember, I never forget that experience because it's like the battles, the music as a DJ, that whole scene, just growing up around that time, just it was so exciting to see that. And then obviously growing up in New York City and you get to see it in live on the street. But I don't know if you've been following, I follow on some of these, the new wave of breakdancers. Yeah, Japan, it's huge in Japan. And some of these competitions, the moves that they're doing, Steve, are bananas, like defying gravity type of stuff. It is crazy. And some of the old moves I think still hold up, but the stuff that kids are doing now, breakdancing wise, it blows my mind that you can even like do that with your body. It's pretty crazy.
Yeah. Well, once it's like the 4-minute mile. The guy broke it and then everybody else started breaking it.
Yeah, Bannister.
Once you see somebody else doing it, you're like, oh, I can do that. Yeah. Maybe I can do that. It's possible, so I'm not going to break my back trying it. Or maybe do, but yeah. And I guess maybe next year, breakdancing in the Olympics?
Oh, yeah. That would be interesting. I mean, it's almost like gymnastics to some extent in terms of how they score gymnastics and they see someone do a flip or something on the horse. They're gauging their ability to do something with precision, I guess, is how you... If they can come up with a scoring system for gymnastics, they can come up with a scoring system.
Right.
Originality. And
3-4 judges with the cards that say 1 through 10. Yeah. Hold them up in the air. Yeah, my best friend, he was very much a maven for breakdancing.
Oh, yeah?
And for hip-hop in general.
Yeah.
And he was in a couple documentaries and all this stuff.
What's his name? What's his name?
My best friend's name?
Yeah, the one who, that you're talking about.
Yeah, Tim Edders.
Oh, that was Tim, okay.
2 M's. Yeah, Tim Edders. Yeah. And he was always promoting hip-hop. He was a mural artist, so he would paint murals in high schools.
Wow.
What a great place to influence people about hip-hop. And we were always on the clean side of hip-hop. There's the bad side, or the perception of bad, the drugs. We were anti-drugs. We were anti all the violence and stuff like that. We were using breakdancing for what it truly should have been. Friendly competition, coming together as a group. Yeah. A lot of good stuff in there. And so, he'd meet some people at these high schools, and they had some really wicked moves, too.
Yeah.
Just... oh, yeah, I breakdance too. And then they do something while he's painting. Crazy.
Did anybody get captured on film?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, Tim always took pictures and video and stuff like that.
Is there any of you breakdancing on film?
Yeah, we have a DVD. In fact, we just celebrated our 40th anniversary of the Crewmasters. So me and a couple of the main guys got together. We not just had the celebration, but a memorial for our friend. And we watched the DVD he put together 20 years ago. It was the 20th anniversary DVD collection. Yeah, there's some video. Not much.
Yeah.
A couple of the big ones I had to miss out on, or I was the DJ in the back, so I wasn't breaking.
Well, if you get it onto YouTube, send us the link. We can put it in the show notes too.
We would be breaking copyright laws because all the music, you know.
Yeah, that's
looking for a perfect beat.
Oh,
Nucleus, jam on.
Africa Bambaataa. Yeah, all that stuff. So I'm curious, like, you know, with what happened to your friend Tim, and is this something that you think about as you get older in terms of life is the cliche life is short, but also just enjoying living life to the fullest, and you think about that stuff a lot more?
Yes.
Yeah.
What's interesting is, so Tim, my best friend, passed from COVID. It was after he passed, I'm always reflecting on things that we did. I'm like, he did some things he shouldn't have been doing because there was financial issues. When you got all these medical bills, you have financial issues. And he did things that they weren't smart, but then he was living life. Yeah. And Tim loved living life. And because he loved living life, he also became more attractive to other people, meaning he was just somebody that you liked.
Yeah.
He didn't stop to think what was more responsible. He did things because of relationships.
Okay.
So I think about that now too. It's like, lighten up, Steve. Lighten up. It doesn't all have to be about budgets and what's going to be best in 5 years. So yeah, I've thought about that a lot since he passed.
Is there any decisions you've made recently that 5 years ago, Steve, or 10 years ago, Steve, probably wouldn't have done because he...
Well, sold the records and the CDs. Yeah. I mean, that was definitely something that was influenced because of there's no need for the records anymore. Yeah. If Tim was still around, I would still have the records because he would come over and we would just spin records whenever he came to visit from Chicago. Yeah. That's not... So, and I'm okay with it again. I'm perfectly fine with letting all that go and having digital versions. So... that was probably the big thing. Yeah. Yeah.
And what's the story behind the Run DMC shirt?
Oh, gosh. We're big fans. We had front row tickets in a Madison, Wisconsin concert.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. So I've got 3 of these. Not this one, but there's like 4, I think, 4 types of these classic shirts. Yeah. And I had 3 of them.
What year did you go to the Run DMC concert?
Gosh, I have that CD. I kept that one. Gosh, I don't know. 1985?
85. Oh, that's pinnacle. Yeah. That's when they're big.
This is before King of Rock. So it was after a couple of the big hits, Walk This Way. Yeah. It wasn't the first concert we saw him at either. So it was just the one I used to work at a record store, so they had a Ticketmaster outlet there. Wow. And we're talking old school stuff here. And so I was able to, score some tickets because nobody in the suburbs of Chicago where I was selling tickets at were in line to buy Run DMC tickets in Madison, Wisconsin. Yeah. And so I was able to get in there and legally... honestly, or what do you call it? I wasn't cheating to get first row.
Yeah. Front row. What was that show like? I never got to see any of I'm trying to think if I got to see any of the old school hip hop artists live. I mean, they were just around, but I don't think that I've ever saw them in concert.
Yeah. Oh man, they were good. But I'll tell you what. Probably I remember. There's 2 concerts I remember most. Yeah. One, we saw LL Cool J. And Bobby Brown, after his first album, just before his second album dropped, saw him open up for LL Cool J. Yeah. I didn't know anything about Bobby Brown.
Oh, really? Yeah, he's a performer, man.
Yeah, I was like, this is good. But we came to see Cool J, and he was, of course, killing it. Yeah. And it was at the not the Rosemont. Anyways, a smaller theater, so maybe not even 1,000 people. Yeah. But the other one was at the Rosemont Theater, which in Chicago is this is the big theater you go to see concerts in, indoor concerts. And we had... probably 40th row or something like that, and we found ourselves up to the 20th row. Not honestly there, but that was like one of those. They had like 8 different artists. Oh yeah. You had Biz Markie, who I didn't care for as much back then, but the one that blew me away. I'd heard the name, we listened to some of the records, but they did such a great job. It just totally transformed me to be an Eric B. and Rakim
Oh my God, of course, yeah.
When you got that bass hitting you and everybody in the room is just... Oh man, thinking of a master plan. Yeah. Wow. Oh. Just classic. So some of those concerts just completely change your mind on the artist, and that one definitely did it.
Especially rappers that back then, I think people underappreciate the skill of rapping or what it takes. And I think of Big Daddy Kane, I think of Eric B. and Rakim. Like true lyricists, when you listen, if you enjoy, you probably get into the music or their songs because of the groove, because of the beat. But then if you slow down now it's so easy to get lyrics or songs nowadays and you can follow along. And it's just amazing, like some of the songs that they would write or the lyrics they would write. And just like, if you think about that now, that's the true skill itself, like that ability to do that.
Do you remember the DOC? Portrait of a Masterpiece?
No.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So that guy is just hitting it. Yeah. And you listen to the lyrics. You got to listen to it 3 times just to catch up with the lyrics.
Yeah.
And the beat is fantastic. You'll listen to it, you go, oh, I know that song. Yeah. I'm sure you spun it once or twice.
Yeah. Okay.
But man, I don't know why that one just came to mind, but that was just this one song that anytime I hear it, blood pressure goes up. I feel like spinning on the floor. It's fantastic.
Yeah. There's certain music that's made for breakdancing, and there's certain beats, and it's that break beat, that amen break beat, and just like there's certain things that you hear and you're just like, oh, you just feel like, even me that never I never was able to like pull off a windmill or, I just got some like footwork, and that's about the extent of it, because when you even just, it would have been nice to just pull off maybe the worm. I think that's probably something I pulled off. Well, yeah. And definitely some popping and locking, but definitely that stuff is next level. But it's really just driven, how much of it is driven by the energy of the music, and how I feel it now with house music, like a song will pull me onto the dance floor. Like I'll hear it and I'll be like, I got to go dance. Like I have to go move to this beat. It's like really interesting.
That was Arthur Baker, Breaker's Revenge. I mean, just those types of records, they were just fantastic samples of things, but really recreated into this completely new energetic beat that you had to get on the floor for.
Yeah. It was, I'm sure everyone of their generation says this is the best time for music or something like that. But I think, honestly, when you get to see births of music, like the birth of hip hop, from the birth of house music, again, from Chicago, it's just like, it feels like a very special time, because there's something interesting about the energy of a movement as it's happening. And people are like, what's this sound? Or it's so exciting. Have you seen the Elvis movie?
I have not.
Oof. It's interesting, because I had always wondered, well, how come no one's ever made a movie about Elvis? He's such an iconic artist, and
copyright.
He deserves like a Ray Charles type-esque movie. And finally they made it, and there's this one scene in there where they show him the first time he starts singing and moving and gyrating his hips, right? This is the 50s or whatever era it was, and they showed the moment where women were like just kind of like losing their mind. They're like shaking, and then all of a sudden the first one was like, like it comes out of her mouth in a way like she can't control it, because she's just like, what's happening here? Like I'm seeing something I've never seen before, and the boyfriends are next to them like all like weird and nervous. But I felt the energy of watching that, kind of the same way like when I first, like the first rap I heard, I think was Roxanne Shante, and and which is an answer record to
a novelty song,
UTFO. But there was that whole battle thing going on, like which rappers would battle each other with music. It's funny, interesting, breakers battling, but with dance. And the first time I heard Roxanne Shante, I was like, I can't understand what she's saying. Like she's literally rapping so fast that I was like, it's so new to me, like this experience. And over time, obviously, you get to hear it and you get to follow along. But just overall, just that energy of experiencing something new for the first time is pretty wild.
I literally had 12 different songs from people in that whole Roxanne. What do you call it? It's like the expansion pack or something like that. I mean, it was crazy how many different people did a song about Roxanne. Yeah. Wow.
She ended up she actually had a little biopic made about her on Netflix. I don't know if you've seen it, but it's about Roxanne Shante and growing up in Queens. So that's pretty exciting.
Yeah, you have to wonder where we're doing a kind of where we are today type of thing, but where are they?
Yes.
Where are they?
Yeah. It's probably, we need a behind the music VH1 for like all these rappers and
and you know what, it's interesting because you can find a lot of this stuff. I mean, Wikipedia is such a great resource for all kinds of things, but there is one artist that I can't find anything on, freestyle artist, but she goes by the name of Monet, and she had some, oh man, these are like Miami beat, high energy type records. My heart gets all the breaks. Come on to me.
Wow.
Oh my gosh. Is it Carlos Barbosa, I think, was the producer?
Yeah. Wow, I know all that stuff.
Yeah. This stuff was just, but I can't find anything about her. Really? What happened to her? So how do you find out? I guess you got to go back and find people who knew the people. And
there's probably Facebook groups talking about freestyle. I mean, because that was the precursor to house music, and it was like a mix of the, Miami-based sound and disco sound, and I mean, freestyle music is its own subgenre, but I had a ton of freestyle on vinyl as well, too.
Yep, anything from Micmac Records.
Yeah.
Those are great.
Yeah.
Fever Records.
Fever Records.
Cover Girls.
Cover Girls, yep. I'm going through the vinyl in my mind right now. It's like flicking through the vinyl. Yeah.
Profile Records with the red and black.
Yes.
Sweet Sensation.
Wow,
we are really just reflecting on old. We've just completely alienated most of your listeners.
Well, I think it's also showing like the diversity of like everything that's made me and made you who I am. I have a DJ SoundCloud, and it's mostly house mixes. It's DJ HD on SoundCloud. And so I'm about 12, 13 mixes over the years that I put together. But I was pulling records, just MP3s the other day, and I was like, I think I'm going to make a freestyle mix. So I've got about 20 or 30 songs I'm going to go through, and I'm just going to make a freestyle mix and just put that on SoundCloud, and just for fun, just because we can. And again, like, it's just a nice trip down memory lane. And it might be...
You don't get in trouble with copyright and stuff like that? No,
on SoundCloud, it's all DJ mixes anyway. So occasionally they'll mention something about a song, but I mean, SoundCloud started as DJ mixes. And funny enough, I've mentioned this a couple of times. When I first heard the word podcast, this is 2012, I understood it to be a DJ mix. Like, I didn't know people spoke on, I didn't know about podcasts with people speaking. So a DJ was like, I got a new podcast up. And I'd be like, oh, cool, that means a DJ mix. And I'd go to SoundCloud and I'd go listen to his podcast. And it was only like when I created a mobile app for electronic music called Know Your DJ, and then I started finding these podcasts where people were talking about mobile apps. I was like, oh, there's actually like, it's actually like,
there's my people.
There's my people. Yeah. So but I have to thank probably DJing for getting me into podcasting. Because
it's funny, a lot of people get into it or from radio or television, or they got some kind of entertainment background. So that makes sense.
So bring that. But see, because we can bring everything full circle back, because now we're going to talk about podcast editing.
Oh, yay, my favorite subject.
Okay, so if anyone's following the threads, we can just pull all those things together and see how, because of everything you've been doing in the podcast space, obviously you know what you were doing, people wanted your help, and specifically, it's interesting the distinction about podcast editing. Is that different than what you would consider just a full-service podcast agency?
Oh, yeah, absolutely, because it's really specific to the post-production side. In fact, this Facebook group that I have, all we do is talk about post-production or running a podcast editing business.
Yeah.
We don't talk about mics and mixers. We don't talk about who's the best media host. We don't talk about how to grow an audience, get on other shows. That's all been done in the other groups. So it's really podcast editing. And people can argue with me on this, but they're wrong. It is post-production. You can't edit yourself as you're recording. You can stop from saying things. Like I have... It's funny, I listened back to episode 22 of Podcast Junkies, and I still have the same verbal crutch. It's my verbal crutch. So I can maybe stop myself from saying, but that's not really editing.
Yeah.
Post-production.
So when did it start to take, because becoming a podcast editor and doing it for clients is one thing, but there's also a certain amount of responsibility and extra work required when you decide you want to have a community around it as well. So what was the decision to do that, and why did you feel you wanted to take that on?
I was being selfish. So I started this in 2016, started editing full-time 2016, and then 2017, it was right around my birthday in January of 2017, I'm like, you know what? There's all these great Facebook groups for podcasters. There's nothing talking about the post-production side. I want to have a discussion about post-production. I thought, well, if nobody else is going to create one, I guess I'll do it. And I knew a couple people who were editing. I didn't know if they were doing it for money or just they did it themselves, but I invited a few to get it going. And within just a month, I think I had at least 100 people in there. And over the years, people just, because that community is, yes, we're in competition with each other, but really there's enough room to go around.
Oh, yeah.
Enough business to go around. So we've just been collaborative and helpful. And we can also, lean on each other's shoulders when we're crying about how this was such a horrible editing job. But it's grown to over 8,700 members.
Wow.
Yeah, since 2017.
Is it still
just because I wanted the group, and I still love it.
Is it still a Facebook group?
Yeah.
How has the dynamic of the group changed when it's a couple of hundred now to now 8,700?
Really, the biggest change has been in the past year or two. The majority of people joining now, well, not majority, I would say almost half the people coming in. These would be new people too, though, so I don't know if they're actually new editors, but they're now saying that their main editing program, because I have 4 questions they have to answer when they join the group. That way I know that they're qualified to be in the group. And the first one is, what do you edit with? If they say Microsoft Word, they don't get into my group. If they say Anchor, they're not getting in my group. I had one person say PowerPoint. I'm like, what? No.
Editing audio with PowerPoint?
it's obviously they weren't the right people for the group. So, but a majority of the people coming in now, their editing program is Premiere Pro,
yeah,
DaVinci Resolve, Logic Pro, and Descript, which are all video editors. Descript does a lot of things, but yeah, so it's really just this huge focus on editing video, which in 2024, I do believe YouTube will legitimately have a podcast app for YouTube podcasts. I know that we have the channels now, but I don't consider that a podcast yet.
And what about Hindenburg?
Well, Hindenburg doesn't edit video. So, you're saying how many people?
Yeah, in terms of people, yeah.
Okay, well, this is interesting because you caught me in a good time. I'm going to pull something up on my computer, and I'll tell you what it's in there. But we just revealed the results from our 2023 Podcast Editor Industry Survey. And so we asked people things. The professional podcast editors in the community say, hey, if you don't mind, we'll anonymize the information, but tell us, what are you charging? How long does it take you to work on it? And then so we can extrapolate information like what's the average rate going on out there? How long does it take people to do? And what's the most popular DAWs? Now, we're talking specifically audio here.
Sure. Not
NLEs, which are video. But
what's NLE stand for?
Non-linear editor.
Oh, okay.
I had to learn that myself this year. How sad is that? Yeah. So we're all growing. Yeah. The main DAW is still, by far, it's at least 2x, even the next one in the line is Audition, Adobe Audition.
Okay.
Yep, it's always number one by a long
industry
shot.
Standard there.
Yeah, in the past, the second one has been very close neck and neck Audacity.
Yeah.
And Reaper.
Yeah. Okay.
And then fourth place was Hindenburg. That's traditionally what it's been. Now, second place is Reaper. Pro Tools is third, which I find interesting because a lot of places where people came into the podcast editing industry that used Pro Tools came from radio or television, studio. And now it's number 3, and then Audacity's number 4, and then Hindenburg's number 5.
Okay.
And we've got some theories as to why that is, because now Descript is in the top 7.
Yeah.
And it wasn't ever in the top 7 before, because, man, Descript is just doing some interesting, crazy things. And with more focus on video, Descript does video, so it just makes sense. People are doing Descript for their audio and video needs.
When was the inflection point in the community and the interest or growth in editors doing focused on video or beginning to add video?
It's been the past year or two.
Yeah.
I mean, there has been, I'd say ever since audiograms became a thing that people thought would work, and I don't think they really do, the focus for video being posted in social grew quite a bit. Yeah. And then with the ease of putting YouTube videos up, everybody started putting their podcast there, whether it was an actual recording or the still frame image of their show logo with the audio playing. Then YouTube became a video platform for podcasts. But in the past year or two is definitely when there was more focus on generating more social clips with the actual people talking, the words popping up on the screen. Actually, it's been 2 or 3 years for that. Yeah. And if I'm already learning how to use some kind of video editing tool to do this, why not just start editing the videos as well?
How different is what they learn or what they get from the community around understanding how to edit a video podcast versus just editing a standard video? Are there nuances between, someone who's just a video editor knows how to edit video versus someone who's specifically editing a video that's a podcast?
Wait, the difference between editing a video and editing a video podcast?
Yeah, well, in the past, you'd have video editors that was their trade. And obviously, it's been more, there's so much competition for that space that you would pay premium. If someone told you there was their video editor, you're like, okay, this is going to cost me an arm and a leg, $300, $400, $500 for a video, for one episode or something like that. Mm-hmm. And now, that's not the case anymore. I mean, I edit video too with Descript and it's so a but do they have to have a mind, a difference? I'm just wondering if people who have been editing traditionally podcast audio, do they have a leg up because they understand podcasting when they move into video?
I don't think so. Okay. I don't think yes, in a way, but not to the extent I think most people would consider. Just because you're in podcast land doesn't mean editing audio doesn't mean you can edit a video podcast at a higher level than somebody who knows how to edit video. Yeah. And we can go back to what people think might be editing a podcast, audio podcast, is oh, well, I take the recording, I put it into a DAW, I put the intro and outro on it, and I'm done. That's editing.
Yeah.
Not really. It can be considered editing, but a very small, that's really not, I don't consider that editing. Same with video then. People take their Zoom recordings and throw them up on YouTube, and they might cut off the beginning and end where they're doing some chit chat or whatever. And that's editing because they brought it into a video editing program, but not really.
Yeah.
But if you're going to be doing something, and I pray people who do video podcasts, true video podcasts, do this. We've got the cameras, we're switching cameras, we're putting slides on there, lower thirds, title slides, whatever. We're making it a little more dynamic, a little more entertaining, more than just two talking heads.
Yeah.
Because if we're going to use YouTube and say these are podcasts, I pray that they're good and not just, oh, this is just two people talking. I don't like this. This podcast thing sucks. No, don't besmirch podcasting because somebody threw their Zoom recording up on YouTube.
Yeah.
So the video editing piece of it, I mean, I would hope that people do more editing of the actual recordings. And that could involve, like I said, camera switching is a big thing right there. It's easier to hide by cutting it out and switching the camera angle when it happened. And that's probably the one major benefit to having multiple cameras for either one person or for if you got two people.
Yeah.
Because I could switch to, like if I get boring or I'm not doing anything exciting on screen, we could easily switch right to Harry's picture where he's going, and then come right back and you took out my or something like that.
Yeah. Or, I mean, if I had enough time to dig through some of these, I'd probably put a snippet of Beat Street or something.
Yeah.
or interlude where we're playing the Monet song while we're having this conversation.
Last Chance by Siri.
Yes.
That's a jam.
Yeah. I feel like we're going to need in-depth show notes for this one.
Chapter markers.
Yeah.
But going back to the video piece with the editing, now we're talking strictly more about the editing and not the engineering. And with the audio, with the post-production engineering, we're talking about audio, we're talking about light, focus, stuff like that. So there's more to it than just editing.
Yeah.
But I think in this discussion, as we're talking about editing, people please forgive me by not talking about those other things. We're just going to include them in the word editing for video and audio here.
But it would seem that anyone who's got a strong fundamentals in editing, tools like the script, makes their job easier, but the fact that the grounding helps them to be probably a better editor in something like the script. Is that?
I don't know. With the script, it's a completely different animal.
Yeah.
I mean, anybody can. If I were to start from nothing, I would probably have to start with the script.
Yeah, I agree.
Although Hindenburg has been a very attractive DAW, but it doesn't do video. So the script is a completely different animal. You're editing text like a Word document. How does that edit audio and video? And then you put these slashes in there, and it changes the scene. So you can switch cameras. You can bring in B-roll.
Yeah.
You can export snippets, and they could then have the words on the screen. So now you have your sound bites for social media. Holy crap! It's all in one. Amazing. Amazing what they've done.
I haven't played around too much with the snippets and playing around with the scenes, and so you could create a snippet in the text section. Are you putting brackets around the thing that you want as your snippet? Is that what you're saying?
Or you highlight it.
Yeah, okay.
Or you can, it's, think of a Word document. You could take the paragraph, highlight it with your cursor.
Yeah.
You're working with that piece. You can move it anywhere you want.
Yeah.
And it moves it in the final product. Or you can export it out as the snippet. Or it's just, and now they have live recording stuff like Squadcast, which Harry Duran is using right now. Use promo code. What is it, Harry? You got an affiliate link for this?
Podcastjunkies.com/squadcast. I don't even know if it works anymore because now it's the script. So congrats to the team for that acquisition. But I just saw today that they announced they're adding the AI tools. They will find the snippet for you now.
Yeah.
So
there's some other programs out there that are very interesting doing the same thing. But if it's built in within the script, it's kind of like it's Walmart. Yeah. One-stop shopping.
Where do you see this headed in terms of, is it just more, is it helping the indie podcaster have the confidence to handle more of these things in-house? Because that would be the big barrier in the past. It's like, I'm just going to do the bare minimum. I'm not going to edit because I can't afford an editor.
Yes and no. Here we're talking about podcasting. Of course the answer is it depends.
It depends, yeah.
It depends is always the answer.
Yeah.
I think that the people who truly want to do a show and will not pay or cannot pay somebody else to help them with it, then they might use a tool. I don't know if it's going to be Descript because it costs money.
Mm-hmm.
Depends on how cheap they are. Now, if they really get into the craft of post-production, they're going to be interested in tools like Hindenburg, like Descript, like DaVinci Resolve. They might just go that direction. That's what I did. I ended up using Isotope RX because I heard about it, and it's now something I use all the time to clean up mouth clicks and take out the lower end of the bass and voice. I mean, it's a tool I'd never heard of. And once I learned what it was, I was like, okay, because I was interested in it. It actually made me a better editor, thank goodness. But with video, you've got to want to try it and commit yourself to learning it. There's lots of software programs I've wanted to learn, and I haven't, just because I haven't committed the time to it. That's my problem. But if I were to open up and I would go with spending a whole full week learning Descript, I'm sure it would completely change what I do.
Yeah, I think it's a function of putting in the time. And I run an agency, so we have folks that do it on the team. So sometimes I'll go in because I want to learn it, but at some point I feel like, do I want to grow the agency, or do I want to like learn how to use the script? And the hobbyist in me is just like, oh, it's such a interesting tool and fun. It's actually fun to work with, when you know what you're doing in there. And so I think when I first started editing audio, I stayed away from a long time, but I did take a mastering class. So I was using Ableton Live. I don't know if anyone's using Ableton Live in your group, but it was what I knew. I learned how to produce because I was producing electronic music. And then I learned the mastering suite, Pro Tools, and then all the Isotope suite, Ozone, all that stuff there to really make stuff sound pristine. So it's really fun. But I think I'll give the RX suite another look. It's been a while since I've taken a look at that.
RX 10 Advanced has dialogue isolate, dialogue de-reverb. So it's not just de-reverb, it's dialogue de-reverb. It's just...
Oh, wow.
Yeah, but what it can't do is recreate the voice, which, guess what?
Descript
now. This is the Descript Hour. Hey, use promo code Descript when you go to harryduran.com/Descript.
So as we get close to the end of this fun and conversation, I'm just curious, like, I don't know if you ever have a chance to look back at what podcasting has done for you or what it's meant for you. When you look at just the experience that I had starting in 2014, I remember getting on the shuttle bus from the airport to New Media Expo in January 2014, just like, I don't know anybody. I'm a complete fish out of water. This is so awkward. It felt like the first day of school. And fast forward to what it's done. It's changed my life. I mean, it's like my business is podcasting. I host 2 shows. Like, I've had the show for almost 10 years. Do you have the time to look back and just really think about what impact it's had on you?
Well, my whole life has changed because of it.
Yeah.
I was a consumer and I wanted to get into it. I did. That lasted 5 years, and then it became a career editing for other people who I like, and because it's the type of content I was creating, because it was really what my interest was in. So I get to work with my peers, my friends.
Yeah.
I am blessed. I am blessed to be able to work on my own schedule.
Yeah.
To make enough money to support our family. My wife quit her toxic job in 2021, and life is fantastic.
Yeah.
So has it changed? It's completely changed my life. From I used to grind it out at the old day job, which involved a lot of travel away from home, stuff like that. And it's just a lot better now. Everything's a lot better. Not just for me, but for my family.
Can you talk a little bit about the community? Because I think that obviously that's how we met, and we got to chat for a little bit and I got to chat with your lovely wife at the conference as well recently at Podcast Movement.
Oh, right.
Yeah. And so how's that been for you? Because I mean, there's friends that I only have because of podcasting as well. So it's interesting.
Right. Well, I'm sure you felt it, but Podcast Movement, Podfest, I go to all these conferences, the podcast-centric ones that I attend, and there's some people that and you're, at this point right now, I'm searching for people I know. We're in a sea of people that I've never had the opportunity to meet. And it's good and bad. More people are coming in. But that means I'm looking for somebody I know to talk to again, but I'm not meeting the new people. What's wrong with me? So this industry has grown since this conversation we had in September of 2014.
Yeah.
Here it's going to be the 10th year of Podcast Movement. It'll be the 10th year for Podfest Expo. Video's the big thing. Social media is big for podcasts. What?
Yeah.
But that's always been the outreach piece of it. It's still going. It's still just rocking along. So, what was the question? I can't remember. Looking at who attends and the community?
Just kind of thinking back, like looking back, and because sometimes they always say, like, sometimes you move so fast that it's hard to just pause and say, like, look back and like, oh wow, look how far I've gotten, or look what I've accomplished, or look where I'm at, or I have a business because of this. And I'm guilty of it too. Like I'm just go, or just what's the next thing, or what's the next client, or, you know, and you don't really think. Sometimes you just got to savor the wins. And I think it's a nice opportunity to do that. And for me personally, to be grateful for everything that it's introduced. And it's exciting to see. I remember, and you and I both remember just mentioning the word podcast to people in 2014 and just be like, what's that? I don't know what that is. And it's rare. You see that Edison research chart, like it's pretty rare for anyone not to know what a podcast is now. So it's fun to watch.
Yep. Yep. Or get a misinterpretation of what one is if it's just on YouTube.
Yeah. So you think YouTube's going to have its own player, not like YouTube?
Oh, it will.
Yeah. YouTube podcast.
YouTube Music is the podcast app. I guess it is now. It's just that they haven't ingested the RSS feed yet, so it doesn't automate it. But YouTube, if your show was only... Here, I'm going to get myself into trouble. YouTube proper versus YouTube Music. YouTube proper was not a podcast app for two main reasons. And actually, Tom Webster defined it brilliantly.
Yeah.
You couldn't listen to YouTube or watch YouTube if you didn't have connection to the internet, because you couldn't download the files to your device. Yeah. And unless you're paying for YouTube, whatever the YouTube plan is, once you turn off your screen, audio stops.
Yeah.
That's not a podcast app.
Yep.
YouTube Music is going to allow that, and I think it does now. So thank goodness. And then once they ingest RSS feeds, it's all over. Anything that goes on to that, and from what I understand, I could be wrong, but from what I understand is if you... whether it's video or audio, if you give them your RSS feed, then it's going to pull the audio to YouTube Music, and then you have an actual podcast app for Google.
Are they going to tie because you can designate a playlist in YouTube as a podcast, which we do now for our clients, and is it going to be able to tie my Captivate RSS feed, if I ingest that, to the fact that there's a YouTube also indication, there's a podcast playlist in there, and tie them together and sync them up?
Right. We'll simplify this. You have to create a playlist and label it podcast in YouTube or YouTube. I don't know how you do it for YouTube Music yet, but somewhere that's going to come into play where you have a channel called podcast, and then whatever you put there becomes podcast. If it's video, it can be on YouTube. Yeah. If it's audio or if it's an RSS feed, it's going to be audio on YouTube Music. That's from what I understand.
But when they say ingest an RSS feed, right now my RSS feed lives on Captivate, right?
Right, you'll submit it to YouTube, and then it'll pull from it automatically.
Okay,
but so it won't be the video.
It won't be the video.
The audio.
Yeah,
that's what I understand it to be.
It'll be interesting to watch for sure. And I mean, we always would try to get stuff on YouTube anyway because it's the #2 search engine and all that. So it feels like it'll be a game changer in terms of visibility. And I noticed this a couple of years ago when I took a Lyft to the airport, and I told him I had a podcast. And when he dropped me off, he's like, "Oh, what's your podcast?" And he pulls out his phone, and he's got YouTube on. He's open. He's like, "What's your podcast?" I was like, that was a bit of a wake up call for me. I was like, okay, I got to think about this differently, and it's going to be. I think this idea of tying it to an RSS feed is, as much as people like the purists want to hold on to that, I think it's just like it's a show. Like when we've talked, I remember talking about this years ago. It's a show, and it's going to be found wherever it's found.
Right. But the problem is if people are looking on their app and it's YouTube and it's not a video, it's not going to be, well, unless you upload it as an audio only with the square image type thing to YouTube, but it's not going to be a true podcast app. Yeah. Not YouTube proper. It's got to be YouTube Music. So that's what I hate most about YouTube killing off the Google Podcast app and moving to YouTube Music is it's still going to be confusing to people who have podcasts. I know. It's our fault too. Podcasters, this is our fault. We put our content on YouTube for exposure. Nothing wrong with that. But people started to expect that a podcast was on YouTube, even though YouTube proper is not a podcast app. Not by the definition that I and Todd Webster have given it, where it's got to be off, off the internet. You can still listen, or the stream can be off and you can still listen without having to pay for the app. So you maybe go down the rabbit hole.
Okay. So,
but a video podcast isn't just on YouTube either.
That's true too.
Look at Spotify. Yep. And Spotify has the closed wall garden thing for videos there. Yeah. But they do offer you the RSS feed to put elsewhere, which is also going to be audio only.
Yeah, that's interesting. I haven't tried that too, because we got one client that wanted to move their show to Spotify because they wanted it to be on video on Spotify. So that was the best way to do that. And I didn't know if we should ingest their RSS audio only feed as well. And I don't know if that's a separate channel. I haven't gone down that rabbit hole. So.
It gets completely confusing. If you want your video on YouTube, you upload it to YouTube. If you want your video on Spotify, if you go to Spotify for podcasters and use that.
Yeah.
If you want them to be on each other, it's 2 separate uploads. And if you want it to be in a third place, it sounds like it's going to be another upload.
Greater minds than us will figure this out, I'm sure.
And tell us how it works. Please tell me how it works. Thanks for having me on, Harry. This has been fun.
I got a couple last questions that we always ask.
Yeah.
Number one, what's something you changed your mind about recently?
Wow. I should have prepped for this. Well, I'm not going to use the same answer we've been using the whole time, which is selling my CDs and my records. Changed my mind on it recently. That only eating meat, cheese, and salt is bad for you.
Okay.
Believe it or not, I think it might be good for you because my wife and I have gotten onto the carnivore diet, and it's been doing wonders for us.
Wow.
And she just got a blood test, so when we get the results, I'll tell you later if it's actually true or not.
That's interesting. Yeah, I've been more conscious of the type of meat and where we're sourcing it from as well. So I think that's been a big upgrade for us in terms of quality of food.
Yeah. And we eat this stuff, and I feel like this is wrong. But then we've been losing weight, and we've been feeling better. And it's like, wait a minute. I guess this is how people were eating before McDonald's, so why not?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Lastly, what is the most misunderstood thing about you?
Most misunderstood thing about me? That I got it all together.
Yeah.
I'm a work in progress just like everybody else. Yep. I'm probably my biggest problem is I'm judgmental. And every day I rein it in. I rein it in because it's not my place to tell the people that I think they're wrong because they're probably not wrong. It's just I didn't want to do it that way or something. Yeah. And so I have to humble myself and tell myself, you're probably not right anyway, Steve, so shut up. Don't say anything. And I do. I'm successfully keeping it in because I'm... And then I realized later, I didn't need to do anything. I was jumping to a conclusion.
I think as we get into this, or we have experienced this crazy world with everything that's happening out there, I think the more we can learn to just be open-minded and accepting of other people's opinions, even if they're wildly different from ours. I think that's one of this idea of just being more accepting overall, because we're never going to agree on everything, and the more we find out, we find out more things we disagree about. And so I think the new skill is, okay, I already know I'm going to disagree with about 4 or 5 things that are going to come out of your mouth, and I have to be okay with that and not impose my opinions on you. So I think that's a valuable lesson to learn. Yeah,
and another reason why I got to just shut my mouth, because if I do say something, I'm going to alienate people, and I'm not going to make friends. I'm not going to get to meet people. And then we don't have these wonderful debates and learn from each other. I love the debates and learning from each other piece because I always learn something new. And that's why my default is judgmental, and I got to rein it in every single day. Yeah. Well, that's a beautiful way to wrap this up. And I think the beauty of these conversations, and I see and feel it when I listen to like a 3-hour conversation on Joe Rogan, I'm like, oh, I kind of know this person now. You get to hear them. And this is why, this is an hour, but it's still, I feel there's something about who you are as a person that gets transmitted through the fact that we're just BSing and just shooting the shit and just talking about random topics, and but it's a conversation, and it's the same one we would be having if we were just sitting at the bar at Podcast Movement, if we just had more time. And so I love this opportunity to just slow down, because as much as I'd love to have these at Podcast Movement, we both know it's nearly impossible with all the stuff that's happening around us. And so I think I just will always treasure having this platform. And even if 5 people or 5,000 people listen, it's mostly for me because I get to connect with my podcast peeps, and I don't see that ending anytime soon. So I appreciate you coming back for round 2 and sharing your story, us sharing our connections and our love and our passion for music. And I think that came through as well today. Music and podcasts. Yes. Yes. So anywhere you want to send folks to connect with you? Yeah, they can, well, if they're interested in getting into editing as a profession, come check out the Podcast Editor Academy. That's where we help people start and grow their podcast editing businesses. If you just want to hang out with other editors, talk about the post-production side of podcasting, just go to Podcast Editors Club on Facebook. That's the main platform that we have this community for all podcast editors, whether they're just doing it for themselves or they're doing it as a business. All right, perfect. We'll make sure all those links are in the show notes. Thanks again, my friend. This was a blast. Thanks, Harry. So great to see you again.